How's it, everybody? Welcome to Exponential Africa Live, a weekly live show that focuses on bringing the best thought leadership, technology and innovation to the African continent and the world. This is our 7th show and the finale for Season 1. And over the last few weeks, we've had an amazing journey. We've explored topics like agility in the time of a crisis, reimagining education, the future of food, robots to the rescue, the 3D printing revolution, and how VR will disrupt reality. All of this culminating in a discussion around the workforce of the future. All of these exponential technologies are going to help us augment our workplace and the world around us. The future of work is one of the most spoken about topics in the business world, and all the areas like remote work, digitization, gig economy, gender equality, and embracing tech are seeing accelerated development, especially since COVID-19. We believe that the future is about scalable lifelong learning, and with the increasing accessibility of information, we have the opportunity to continue learning, developing, and solving problems. Our mission as SingularityU South Africa and Man-Made is to help future-proof Africa by building a global community of change makers who can help solve some of Africa's and the world's greatest challenges to lead the way into the future. We do this through various educational experiences that educate, empower, and inspire, and by building our community and network. We believe that we have 3 choices. Either we can give up, give in, or give it all we've got. We're going to give it all we've got, and we hope that you will too. We need to come together to forge a new direction and use the opportunity to upgrade the ways of working. And we know that it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. So tonight we'll be covering the workforce for the future with some of the latest developments in the space and why we think that now is the right time to radically improve this ecosystem. We have Krista Pawley, SingularityU Canada co-founder and head of reputation and impact. Adao Bamiduro, who is the CEO of MaxNG, a pioneering mobility platform in sub-Saharan Africa. Hilda Liswani, who is the founder and CEO of WeBloom Africa, which is mainstreaming gender lens investing in Africa. And Valter Adao, who is the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer at Deloitte, and SingularityU SA Faculty, specializing on the future of work. A very special thank you to our partners, who this would not be possible without, our collaboration partner, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, our global partner Deloitte, and our strategic partner MTN. Thanks for your commitment and dedication to making a positive impact in South Africa and Africa. Lastly, if you want to keep learning about exponential technologies and thought leadership, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube page. Click the bell next to the subscribe button to get notified when we go live, and register on the website to get more info and be eligible for giveaways. Keep sending us your ideas for future shows and your feedback on how we can get better. We really are grateful for the feedback so far. Keep it coming. Thank you to all of you for watching, subscribing, and engaging with us. Super. Let's jump right into it. Here's this week's roundup of tech-related stories from around the world. Engineering.com reported on Chinese automobile company Geely's solution to maintain a reliable data feed. They're just going to make their own satellite constellation. Geely owns Volvo and has a stake in Daimler-Benz, and now they're investing $326 million in a satellite manufacturing plant. As we know, one of the most important components in an autonomous vehicle is its communications technology, which allows it to navigate. The satellites will offer high-speed internet connectivity and cloud computing capabilities to the company's autonomous vehicles. Speaking of constellations, Erica the robot is a rising star in a film. Erica, a robot created by Japanese roboticists Hiroshi Ishiguro and Kohei Ogawa, is going to be in a movie. The movie B is currently in development. Now, we mean no disrespect to Marlon Brando and his 60-year-long career. Erica has been around for a long time, and she's already skilled in Stanislavski's method acting. On to bioengineering in the beauty industry. Beauty company 18B uses bioengineered and lab-grown silk protein as a key ingredient for beauty products. They're tapping into silk's ability to heal wounds, according to the company. Their exclusive beauty products will form a breathable, protective barrier that will help skin retain moisture, while also firming and smoothing it over time. Continuing with wellness, Lululemon has bought the at-home workout platform Mirror. Lululemon, an athletic apparel company, has acquired Mirror for a cool $500 million US. Mirror uses its own hardware and responsive software to offer weekly live classes, on-demand workouts, and one-on-one personal training. What will the future of workouts in retail look like? And in fintech news, blockchain creates real value in traditional industries. Deloitte's 2020 Global Blockchain Survey had some respondents feel as if blockchain has been overhyped. And yet the survey also showed that there's been a definite increase in the use of blockchain. Cointelegraph.com reported that companies and organizations have turned to blockchain to trace assets and products, trigger and track transactions, and create a layer of trust between parties that didn't necessarily trust each other. Robot recruitment is on the rise, and the computer says no. The New Economy reports that businesses are increasingly using AI to streamline the recruitment process. This means that there is a large chance that your CV will not even be viewed by a human in the future. Resume robots can instantly scan CVs or keywords and essential skills, eliminating candidates so that human recruiters don't have to. This is changing the role of HR teams significantly. So how do you stand a chance of getting through the AI round? Use the exact vocabulary from the job description. Standardize your previous job roles. So instead of saying something like digital overlord, use plain old website manager. The next best rule of thumb is to ensure that you are applying for the jobs that are actually you are skilled to perform. And speaking of performance, a CNC machine is making 2 million parts a month. How did they do that? With cobots. A high quality and reliable screw-and-see CNC machine shop, Swiss Productions, has gained a competitive advantage with cobots on their CNC mills. Cobots work in unison with humans, so together they've eliminated idle time. They've more than doubled their productivity and are producing 2 million parts a month for medical electronics, aerospace, and government. Tonight we're highlighting the African company Metro Africa Express Inc., or max.ng. With over 17.5 million people in Lagos alone and traffic that would make anybody nervous, this is a company that is truly making a difference. Their model is simple yet effective. Hail a motorcycle ride at the tap of a button. Get a helmet and a hairnet and you're on your way. When the trip is over, you pay with your debit card, Max Wallet or cash. There's a Rate Your Champion feedback loop and an opportunity to provide feedback about your trip on the platform. And if you own a motorcycle or keke, you can become a MaxGo partner where your vehicle is used to transport guests, and max.ng will manage the entire process. It's their mission to make mobility safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable through the development of high-performance technology and operators. With over 2 million trips and more than 2,000 drivers, they are making a wave in the transport industry. And I'm proud to say that you'll be hearing from their co-founder and CEO, Adao Bamiduro, later in the show. So we started the show 7 weeks ago, and we've been asking for donations every week to help students at Maharishi Institute by raising funds for data and devices to keep them learning. And thanks to all the amazing human beings for donating to Maharishi already. We've raised over 12,500 Rand, and we're hoping to raise this number to 15,000 Rand before the end of this show. So please donate now by scanning the QR code on the screen, and you can also go to the website if you don't get a chance to scan it right now. You can donate via EFT, PayPal, Zapper, or SnapScan. All the proceeds from tonight's donations will go to helping educate students in South Africa. Maharishi Institute educates and helps students from really tough financial backgrounds with a world-class education. And our main prize tonight in the Share the Tech Love will be a 5-year business degree from Maharishi Institute, valued at over 2.2 million Rand or $125,000, including daily lunch and all the learning materials. Stay tuned to see who will take away that prize to help educate and transform someone's life who's previously underprivileged. Scan the QR code above me or on the screen, and all the proceeds will go to Maharishi Institute, and you will personally be making a positive difference in South Africa. We'll leave the QR code up on the screen as much as possible, allowing you the opportunity to donate. Any help would be highly appreciated. A small donation goes a really long way. Right, it's time to move into the main part of tonight's show, the Workforce of the Future panel. The future of work directs so much attention, both locally and globally, in many ways, and especially because of COVID, has accelerated its development, from embracing digitization to working remotely to the gig economy, platform adoption, gender equality, and embracing exponential technologies to augment the workforce. We need practical solutions to be implemented to help the immediate challenges now that have been created for organizations and employees, and the direction to lead us into a more abundant future. Ray Kurzweil, one of the founders of Singularity University, predicts that by 2029, we will reverse engineer the human brain and the computer becomes as smart as a human being. And by 2045, the computational power will be so great that we'll be able to reverse engineer 9 billion people's brains, and we will have this technological singularity, which will ultimately change everything. But as we're leading up to Ray's prediction, there's a lot to discuss in order to build the future we want to live in. And there is a lot of stuff in between to discuss, like the future of work. So tonight we have Krista Pawley, Adao Bamidoro, Hilda Liswani, and Valter Adao. Let's start with Krista. Krista Pawley is the co-founder and head of reputation and impact at SingularityU Canada, designing experiences and reputation strategies for leaders working at the intersection of innovation and impact to understand, prepare, and shape a more sustainable future. Krista, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mick. It's great to be here.
And thanks for joining us all the way from Canada. Which city in Canada are you in at the moment?
I'm in Toronto right now.
Awesome. And how's it going there? How's the atmosphere in Canada?
Well, we're in summer right now, so Canadians are generally happier. It's quite warm, so that's fantastic. In Ontario, the province that I'm in the city in Toronto where I am, we're in what we call phase 2 of reopening around COVID, which means we're just starting to open back up, but things like schools and most of our large workplaces are still closed. So we're still in a real transition period. We're now beyond the idea of thinking that this is temporary and starting to talk about what is the new normal and how might we start to consider a build back better philosophy, because we've recognized that, well, we have a bit of a reprieve right now with the warm, beautiful weather. Our health experts are speaking about a reemergence of the pandemic or some form of that in September through November, and looking and planning for that from a business perspective.
Now, we are similar organizations in different territories. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at SingularityU Canada, and how do you create real impact? We've got quite different economies and environments, but how are you guys doing it?
Absolutely. And I mean, as you've mentioned, so SingularityU Canada and SingularityU South Africa are part of this amazing SingularityU global ecosystem made up of country partners around the world who link into the headquarters in the US. How we work in Canada is that because Canada has such a huge geography, we're really focused on building a pan-Canadian community. And our whole emphasis has been on identifying leaders at every level and across all sectors and bringing them together to create a more sustainable and, as you say, future-proof Canada. Canada, like Africa, has this challenge of geography. We're also incredibly multicultural. And so we're looking to really bring together a diversity of perspectives, which I think is where South Africa and Canada have some commonalities. Where we become a little different in our execution is for us just the space, and we don't have the same density of population. So something that we've been looking at well before the pandemic hit was how can we use technology to actually bring our disparate communities together and to create more inclusive experiences. And so whether that be through our executive programs, through our major events and summits, and I see that you've got yours coming up in October online, which I'm incredibly excited about. We do the same thing here in Canada to really try to convene those communities and to inspire our leaders as well.
And how have you seen, during this time of COVID, how have you seen people embracing tech to sort of pivot and be agile and adaptable during this time?
We've seen it in a bunch of different ways. So in our large corporations, and we work with a number of large corporations through SingularityU, we're seeing a real movement towards enabling greater work from home, and it's also catalyzing new conversations. So what a week before COVID hit was impossible, in the words of one client we were working with who was talking about moving their call center into a home-based model, is now how they're functioning. And so this has really pushed that mindset that so many leaders have of what used to be absolutely inconceivable, we're now imagining. And that's creating huge opportunities to truly reimagine what the future of work might look like. In Canada, a major part of our economy is our small and medium-sized business sector. They are our primary driver. And so we're seeing some pivots there as well. Looking to upskill a lot of our small and medium-sized businesses, taking our main street onto a digital world. So seeing a big increase in that transformation, and really helping people to understand what opportunities might be there that they hadn't conceived of before. So I've seen traditional manufacturing companies pivoting into PPE production. I'm seeing freelancers looking at creating different models for how they might create more sustainable models of work and how they might go after clients. I don't think it's happenstance that Shopify is a Canadian company. I mean, Canada is incredible at e-commerce. And so you're seeing a lot of our innovation come in that space as well. We're also seeing a huge uptick in innovation around medical tech and science and research. And I think a lot of the open research philosophies that have started in Canada have really helped to enable that type of work. So across the board, we're seeing technology influence how people are working. I will say the flag that we have here in Canada is that digital engagement works if you have access to high-speed bandwidth and if you have the technology. So another big piece of focus, and our government has just made a large announcement around this, is ensuring that all Canadians have access to that technology, so that we're actually looking at digital equity as a principle. And that's really going to be key, I would say, globally, to ensuring that we can bring the best of the world together into this digital economy.
No, thanks so much for that. I think that's quite a very interesting concept, digital equity, and we'll get back into that a bit later in the panel. And for us, it's so interesting because we've been embracing a lot of these technologies and these platforms because we are working on this in this global organization. We're all on Slack, we're all on Salesforce or the different communication tools. So I think it's very exciting that we all have to sort of get into this digital world now. We're going to move on to our next guest, who's Adao Bamiduro. Adao is the CEO and co-founder of Max.ng, a pioneering mobility platform in sub-Saharan Africa. Adao is an MIT, Techstars, PwC, and Dalberg alum over the last 5 years, and he has become a leading innovator and global expert on sustainable mobility and digital financial inclusion. Adao, great to have you on the show all the way from Nigeria.
Thanks, Mick. Excited to be here.
And it's great. We've had quite a long relationship where we've been following your progress, and it's been incredible how you've literally gone exponential over the last couple of years with your business. Do you want to just tell us a bit more about what you guys are doing and how you're getting into this financial inclusion area?
Absolutely. When you look at Nigeria and West Africa, and for the most part, most African countries, our economies are still, mostly informal, essentially. So what that means is people are not, connected to the formal financial system. So what we've done over the last few years is to build platforms, mobile platforms, and also create financing mechanisms that allow us to bring informal motor taxi drivers into the formal economy. And it's a pretty simple process, right? Which includes providing them access to funding, access to vehicles, and also creating digital wallets and digital IDs for them, right? And providing that platform to allow them to leverage technology to enhance their lives or to access critical services like health, healthcare. So by joining our platform, they get access to things like health insurance and things like that. So we're solving, this really important problem that ensures that people are able to access higher quality of life, right? And at the same time, generate much more revenue than they could by operating on their own. It's been quite an amazing journey. And, right now we're doing a lot of work, even with governments trying to drive policy, changes to ensure, that customers, drivers, and small businesses get the most value out of digital platforms in a way that is sustainable, that is transparent, and that essentially, meets the needs that they have. So it's been quite an amazing journey, and looking forward to the future.
No, that's really, really interesting. And I mean, what are your views on the gig economy? Because if you think about it, what you're doing is you've got a gig economy business, but a lot of the people that you start working with you on the platform become sort of long-term members or almost like they're fully employed. So what are your thoughts on the gig economy versus full-time employment?
I think, the gig economy is absolutely the future, right? Because what the gig economy allows you to do is to be productive when you want to be. It allows you to earn money when you want to be. So, all of the challenges associated with traditional forms of employment, where you have to sit at a desk, for 8 hours a day or even more, as the case may be, that is gradually getting outdated now because, when you also think about the workforce of the future, what is important is productivity, right? So it doesn't matter how long you sit at your desk, if you're not productive, that doesn't help any company, that doesn't help anyone. So, leveraging technology to do your work, right? When you want to do it in a way that is also relevant and productive, for the people, for your customers is all that really matters now, not any old school traditional systems that don't necessarily even deliver value to our intended end users. So, the onset of COVID-19 is simply just going to accelerate that reality because, what COVID-19 has forced a lot of us to do around the world is to stay home, right? But we've stayed home and most of us have remained productive. In fact, in many cases, many of us are even more productive because all the time that we put into commuting, especially when you look at cities like Lagos, or London or New York, that are extremely dense and there's just, all kinds of really crazy traffic congestions that people go through. Right now, we are realizing that we can actually be as productive or even more productive right from our homes, right? So what we are going to witness and what we are witnessing right now is a complete, total, fundamental shift in the concept of work and in the concept of productivity.
No, thanks for that. I think it's so interesting to see how it's all changing so fast, and we're going to go into that a bit more when we go into our panel. I'm going to welcome on our next guest, who is Hilda Liswani. Hilda is an award-winning sustainable investments professional. As an independent consultant, she has gained over 7 years of experience in business development and public-private partnerships. She now runs her own organization, WeBloom Africa, which is mainstreaming gender lens investing in Africa. Hilda, thanks for joining us on the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for that great introduction. I'm really, really pleased and thrilled to be on this platform, and I was very refreshed that something like this is even out there. So I feel very honored to be adding my voice to your movement.
No, thank you so much. And you are dialing in all the way from Switzerland, right?
Yes, I am based in Switzerland, Zurich to be specific.
Amazing. And do you want to tell us a little bit about WeBloom Africa? It sounds like it's an incredible new company, and you've just been named as one of the Forbes under 30 to watch in business. So do you want to just share with us what WeBloom Africa is trying to achieve?
Sure, gladly. I mean, WeBloom Africa is really birthed out of a passion project of mine, and the impetus for me founding WeBloom was years of work that I've done with organizations such as Seaman, the MasterCard Foundation, and the European Union. And with all of these great institutions, I had the privilege of working in many different African entrepreneurial and tech ecosystems, and see for myself firsthand all of these different nuances that are at play on the ground, and how these dynamics take shape in the form of individual and specific entrepreneurs, how culture ties into this, how infrastructure ties into this, and all of these myriad of issues. And out of all of that work, what I found is even though Africa is on this great path, because we have the advantage of a young population, meaning a lot of energy and a lot of entrepreneurs, and we don't have this kind of legacy infrastructure, which means we can leapfrog a lot of different systems, which is not the case here in Europe. What I found is, as much as there's a lot of opportunity for this, there's still a huge demographic within this conversation that is still being categorically left behind, which is women entrepreneurs. So through WeBloom Africa, what we're really doing is mainstreaming gender lens investing in Africa, which basically means, it's a fancy way of saying helping people who allocate their money and investments towards Africa, towards entrepreneurs, helping them find those opportunities also in women-led organizations. Because what we found is there's a lot of capital allocation at the moment being driven towards the African continent, maybe traditional investments or, sustainable impact investments for social impact. And in both cases, women are being disproportionately left behind. They're being disproportionately also left behind when it comes to different ecosystem players such as incubators and accelerators. So what WeBloom Africa is really trying to do is just create a platform to assist different women-led organizations and entrepreneurs enter the mainstream of this narrative and enter the mainstream of this great wave of entrepreneurial spirit that will hopefully bring Africa into its renaissance. And so on the one hand, we work with women entrepreneurs on the ground. We come to them and help them with their business models. So help them really optimize sustainable business models within their operations. We help them with their financial reporting and management, and we also pair them with mentors and coaches. And then on the other end, because as much as it's important to, of course, work with women entrepreneurs on the ground, we also actively work with investors. So that's institutional investors, that's individual investors, may they be in Africa or here in Europe, and we hold various advocacy activities and workshops because a big part of the reason why people still don't invest in women is because we all have these internal biases, right? And for some reason, through media, through narrative, through cultural, upbringing, there's this kind of internal bias, which is not only an African case. There have been studies made here in Europe and the US as well that show that VCs and investors are less likely to invest in women because of internal biases. So working also directly with investors to start to chip away at these biases and really show them that investing in women is just as worthwhile and just as fruitful as investing in men. So we are definitely not anti male-led entrepreneurs in Africa. Definitely not. I mean, we think that all of the energy is needed, and all we're trying to do is include women within that conversation and within that stream of energy.
No, thanks so much for that. I think it's hugely important what you're doing, and gender equality is becoming a lot more a spoken about topic, which I think is a great step forward towards transforming the workplace and the investment landscape. So thanks so much for what you're doing. Let's move on to our next panelist, who is a good friend, Valter Adao. Valter Adao is the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer of Deloitte Africa and SingularityU South Africa faculty member, specializing on the future of work and digital transformation. Valter is recognized as an expert in the fields of disruptive innovation, business reimagination, and emerging technologies through work that he has led for organizations in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Valter, thanks for being on the show. It sounds like you're on mute there. Do you want to just turn your audio on and off? No, you're still on mute. Just give us a second. Try again now. Okay, so let's, we're having a few audio sound issues with you, Valter, there. Let's go. We're going to go into the panel and we'll try work that out and we'll come back to you. If you can just try to turn your sound on and off there, it might. So while we're waiting for Valter there, we're working out the sound, let's move on to one of our first questions is, what do you think the new workforce of the future will be post-COVID? Let's start with you, Krista.
So I think the workforce of the future is going to be global, is one of the first pieces. I think that this move and shift towards a digital environment has opened up the opportunity to really bring the best of the world together to solve challenges, whether those be what we're passionate about, which are some of these grand challenges and the SDGs, but also business challenges and that ability to really connect. So I agree absolutely with Adao that I think the principles of the gig economy are going to become much bigger in the shape that our workforce takes on. I also agree wholeheartedly with Hilda and the point that I think that the future of work is also, and I'm hoping, going to be more inclusive. And I think a lot of the conversations that we're seeing right now around data ethics and inclusive data and starting from some of those core principles, the opportunity that we have to redefine work and what we count as work is also going to be critical. So I think this is nothing less than a seismic shift in how we define work. And rather than being frightened by it, I hope that people will take a mindset of energy and excitement around what we can build together. And so for me, that the future of work is exciting, it's inclusive, it's diverse, and it's global.
No, I totally agree with that. I mean, it's really about how do you access the new global economy now? How do you embrace these platforms and access work all around the world, as you say? I think we have got Valter back online now. Can we cut to Valter? Are you there?
Yeah. Can you pick me up now?
We can. I think we can hear you. Valter, how are you doing?
All good. Apologies for that. I just had to refresh and come back into the system. Now it seems all okay. Thanks for having me on your...
Can you just speak up a bit, Valter? It isn't sounding 100% correct. That is a bit better. So Valter, do you want to tell us a little bit about, you deal with a lot of leaders and, specifically in your job, what's going on in your world, because there's been this massive societal impact from COVID-19 and a bifurcation in the economy. How do we make sure we can shorten this dip as leaders or employees in organizations?
The future of work conversation has been one that's been going on for some time. And it's not just in large organizations. If you think of it, once we get over the exponential technology, next thing we're going to impact that these exponential technologies on jobs. Conversations, both at
Valter, I'm going to just stop you there. We can't really hear you. I don't know if anyone else in the panel can hear Valter. No. So we're going to just. I think we'll move on to Adao just to give us some feedback around the future of work from your point of view in Nigeria. I think we need to just refresh you there, Valter.
Okay, sure. So I mean, in Nigeria, right? Over the last couple of years, there's been a little, it's been a little slower in terms of, embracing remote work concepts and a bunch of other new ideas around how we can be effective without necessarily co-locating together, right? So at the onset of COVID and the impact of the pandemic, a lot of those mindsets have shifted quite quickly. A case in point, for example, is if you look at some companies and some such as Andela, for example, which is a company that connects our smart engineers in Africa to work opportunities in the United States. They've gone 100% remote, right? So right now, they're selling off their property, and all their engineers no longer have to be co-located in one location anymore, right? And that has been accelerated. And I've seen that same impact, across multiple organizations now. Even local banks in Nigeria, are starting to review, the nature of their business. Now, of course, there are negative, consequences or negative short-term consequences, because what it means is, a bunch of people are going to lose their jobs. Facilities managers are going to lose their jobs, and some folks who work in support services are going to lose their jobs as well. But I think, if you look at this in terms of the medium to long term transformation that would happen, ultimately, people will begin to move a lot more towards career paths and career options that are fundamentally, much more productive and more necessary for, what the workforce of the future would look like. So even in Nigeria, that transformation is very well underway, and it's very welcome, right? If you look at a city like Lagos, traffic congestion at peak periods is completely insane. So when companies now are a lot more flexible than they've ever been before, and they're starting to allow much larger, chunks and percentages of their workforce, to work from home, then, that is really good, because it improves even the quality of life for people. You don't have to spend 4 to 6 hours commuting every day anymore, if you can deliver impact, and deliver results right from your home.
So interesting. I think we have a similar environment in South Africa, where a lot of businesses are learning to work remotely. Hilda, how's it working for you in Switzerland? Because I know Switzerland took quite a different approach towards the lockdown. What are you seeing there in terms of how the workforce is adapting to COVID and beyond?
Yeah, Switzerland was one of those countries that were a bit slower to kind of bring on restrictions and start the lockdown. But eventually we did enter into the lockdown situation where most activity was banned. But obviously now that that's opening up, and I think the biggest shift here, I think in general, we've been very lucky globally in terms of what the COVID implications have been for Switzerland. We're definitely dealing with it much better compared to our fellow European counterparts. And one of the biggest things for me is that this COVID has proven that people can still be productive even if they don't go to the office, right? I think for many companies, this has been the biggest light bulb moment, that we don't need this, you have to be at the office 9 to 5 in order to be productive, which goes back to Adeteo's point about what productivity really means, and how we need to start to dismantle, our kind of historic paradigms of what work should be and what productivity looks like. So I think for the most part, that's how work has changed, that we have a different work-life balance, and work has come home. So you have a lot of meetings where the kids are in the background and it's completely fine and things are going on as usual. So I think that's been the biggest thing. But at the same time, that only speaks to a very specific portion of the workforce. So we also need to consider entrepreneurs, we need to consider freelancers. This doesn't necessarily implicate their lives in a positive light, right? Many entrepreneurs, because of this, maybe they haven't been digitally integrated yet, and so they've completely gone out of business, for example, and now are not even in a position to kind of look for alternatives, because the whole world is in a lockdown and there's not opportunities falling from the sky. So I think the conversation is more complex than we think, and we need to take a real nuanced look at the different kind of portions within our workforce. People such as myself and the rest of the people on the panel that maybe have full-time jobs, I think we're safeguarded. But there's a huge portion of our populations here in Europe as well as in Africa that don't have that safety net and that comfort. And that's when we need to start thinking about how our systems and the systems that we've built, how they are coming together to support our different workforces. And it's not always the case for for everyone participating within this huge spectrum that we call the workforce. So I think all in all, in terms of Switzerland, we're very lucky. But I think in terms of looking at COVID and how it's changing the workforce, we definitely need to take a very nuanced look before we get too hopeful and too optimistic about the future, because I think for the most part, most of the world is gonna be left really struggling because of COVID in terms of finding income and finding opportunities. So yeah, that is really my main takeaway when it comes to how COVID is kind of implicating the workforce for the moment.
No, thanks for that. Krista, do you want to add to that?
If you don't mind. I agree with what Hilda said in that I think that it's impacting the workforce, and we say the word the workforce, and it's not a homogeneous group. The reality is, as Hilda said, there are so many different components. And yes, those who work in large institutions and those who have access to the technology, this creates huge opportunities, and they're able to take those on immediately. For those who are not yet part of that inclusive digital ecosystem, this presents barriers. And I think that that is the challenge to many of us, is to look at how might we help to ensure that we're bringing the full capacity of that whole global workforce to the table. And we need to be deliberate around that. We can't be blind to the fact that there is a real question of digital equity here. I also come in and the mention of work coming home. So I'll be very personal. I have 3 young children, and running a business while also trying to care for 3 young children, I have more work than ever before. And so recognizing the impact that that's having. So this idea of work-life balance is something we need to reevaluate, and we need to question whether it's hours doing the work, or to the point that both Adao and Hilda have raised, is it productivity, and how do we measure that? And another big question that I want to bring in here is mental health, and recognizing the pressure that this is putting on people around the globe. Is the reality that now that you have some wage uncertainty, that you have health uncertainty, that you have people who are in a confined space together, what is that doing? And that's something that as workforce leaders, we need to be considering, because if we want to maintain that productivity, we need to ensure that the people we work with are healthy in all forms. And we can get into conversations around universal basic income and how that might impact, but it's something we need to surface and talk about.
No, absolutely. I think it's one of the most important conversations we can have right now, because it is changing this fast. We're going to move on to some of the questions now. We're still trying to work out Valter's audio, so we'll just go into some of the questions that you guys are asking from the panel on YouTube. And I can see that Ian Duplessis is asking, how do you see leaders on having their employees not sitting in local country but working from overseas, enabling employees to experience living overseas, but still contributing to the same company? Adao, do you want to kick that off?
Sure, absolutely. So if I might ensure that I understand the question is, how do our companies continue to leverage on expertise globally, right? Who are not necessarily domiciled in the same country, but can contribute towards the company or the organization's objectives remotely. Is that the question?
Yes, that's the question. Yes.
Okay, sure. One really fascinating thing about how the workforce dynamics are changing is the fact that talent can go anywhere, right? And I mentioned previously, what a company like Andela, for example, has done, and how the business model allows them to go fully remote, right? Like they've gone remote almost in an instant, right? Now, what are the implications for Africa, right, and other even emerging markets and developing economies? Because when you think about economic development, right, and some of the struggles that we have today as a continent, one of the biggest challenges we have is access to talent, especially when you talk about issues like brain drain, for example. So you have a huge amount of really smart, talented people who decide to move to places like the US, Europe and Canada in such a better opportunities, and then their home country starts to suffer, because this expertise is no longer available to solve local problems. But the exciting thing about the workforce of the future is now that no longer is a problem, because this same smart, intelligent diasporans, whilst living in other countries and living in the West or wherever it is they've gone to, can still play a very significant role in driving, growth and economic development in their own countries. Because now space is no longer a barrier, right, to impact and productivity. So I think that it's a really exciting and really exciting transformation that's happening, because now we're in a much stronger position to attract talent, irrespective of where we are, whether it's in South Africa or Zimbabwe or Kenya or Nigeria or Egypt. We don't have to necessarily physically move people into our countries in order to benefit from their talent. And I bet in order to solve some of the complex problems that we're dealing with, we need expertise from all around the world. So this is quite exciting.
No, absolutely. And Hilda, do you want to add to that? How do you think we can achieve this challenge?
I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding, and we are now starting to build the empirical evidence that we can still get things done remotely. For example, all of the various hackathons that have been going on across the globe, bringing teams from different countries together and then building and prototyping living, breathing solutions for COVID or whatever challenge may be. And I think the more of these kind of proof of concepts that we have, and the more we build the blueprint, the better we'll be able to make these kinds of informed decisions. Because I think it's still very early days to be able to really concretely say and predict that this new remote working can be kind of a long-term solution for many firms, because this situation is still unfolding and there's so many things we don't know. But I think for the most part, if we look at the empirical evidence, the proof is really in the pudding. I think it always goes back to what Adao said and what Krista also touched on, is we need to also figure out how to redefine productivity, and that's really where everything lies. And I think that could be also an opportunity for us to start questioning, like I mentioned before, our internal biases, and starting to really question who we let into the room and at the table, and if these doors really can be open, that means we can let more Africans into huge multinational companies, maybe based in Europe, more South Americans, and have a more really equal distribution of talent. So to the question, I don't have like a concrete answer as to, this is definitely going to happen and this should happen. But looking at previous or the trends since COVID and what's been proven, I think we are in the direction of proving that this is a new model that can be adopted. And I think if we harness this new model to also include marginalized people, marginalized voices, and really use it as an opportunity to also include them within this conversation, I think it's only a plus. But it really takes a concerted effort, and for us to really be consciously striving for that.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Krista, do you want to add to that?
Huge opportunity for Africa. I think the fact that Africa is not inhibited by the legacy institutions and infrastructure that so much of the rest of the world has proven in the past that Africa comes up with brilliant ideas that others haven't conceived of because they're held back. I also see organizations like the Maharishi Institute, like the African Leadership Academy and Fred Swaniker's work, and I see this incredible cohort of brilliance in Africa. And I think the companies and the organizations that are going to really come out of this COVID period as the winners are those that are going to identify and to Hilda's point, are going to deliberately go and seek that diversity of presence around the table, that they're going to go to Africa and say, we need your perspective here, and be active in that choice. And I think that this is a huge opportunity, and what that will mean for our creativity globally is huge. And so I'm really excited to see more Africa around the global table. And I challenge organizations to be deliberate in that decision.
No, I totally agree with you. There's a great quote from John Hunt, who's one of the legendary admin of South Africa, and he says, if you embrace diversity, it will hug you right back. So we really believe in that. It's really about embracing diversity in many different voices to getting the best outcome. Let's move on to another question from Katlego Tabo, who's asking, given the shifts happening from a workforce standpoint, what are the 2 to 3 best things you'd recommend individuals, employees do to maximize and take advantage of opportunities? And I guess this is a lead on from your previous point, Krista. Do you want to take a lead on this one?
Sure. So first I'll give a resource. So go to futurestarters.org. This is something that we at SU Canada have created, but I think it might be helpful to answer this question, because I think a big thing is identify what your blind spots are. What are the things that you're not seeing? And don't worry about it. We all have them. It's part of who we are as humans. And then think about what mindsets you're going to need to be successful going into this future economy. And I'm going to be very specific here so that doesn't just sound like a lot of jargon. I think that there is a real need to start thinking at the edge. So while organizations may have their core products, we're going to need to be innovating at that edge. We're also going to need to start thinking about what is a fall versus a fail, and recognizing where we're comfortable doing some innovation and where there are things that we just can't fail in, and really embracing that falling and that comfort there within our organizations. So that ability to understand, what am I not seeing, and start to consider it. And then what is the mindset that I need to be able to address that blind spot and take advantage of these future opportunities. So check out futurestarters.org, because there's some great frameworks there that might be helpful.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. Hilda, do you want to add to that question?
Yeah, and I think it's a fantastic question, actually. And this is something that we're working day to day with our entrepreneurs on the ground. Many entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs in Africa, that are now faced with the challenge of having to embed more digital technologies within their operations to really kind of integrate maybe e-commerce and things like this. And so looking at the ground and being able to pull from my experiences there, I think the key is to really be firmly grounded in whatever you do in a relevant challenge. And I think that's the kind of gift and curse of Africa. We have a myriad of challenges. And I think once we start looking at our challenges as opportunities, we really start looking at investing our time and resources in something that will be sustained over time, and that will actually bring value not only to yourself, but to society. And so this is what we do really with WeBloom, and also what I do with various institutions, bringing about this idea and concept of sustainable business models, being able to extract value within a service or a product or a challenge that can speak to both financial sustainability and either social, environmental, or societal sustainability and impact. And I think for Africa, this is something that needs more light to be shed on it, because we do have so many challenges, and we are still very much dependent on a lot of kind of outside maybe aid or international development agencies, a myriad of things. And and sources of help. And so at the same time, we have this huge cohort of African citizens who are looking for these opportunities and like the question, where do I spend my time? Where should I be directing my efforts? And I would say really investigate in your own community, in your own society. Find those challenges and then start really kind of dissecting them and finding ways to extract value from those challenges, so that not only are you able to sustain yourself financially, but you're also able to bring value to our community. So this is something that I always preach to my entrepreneurs, to various organizations I work with. We need to start bolstering and harnessing this idea of sustainable business models, that you can make a living by doing good. And for Africa, we need to make a living. I mean, that's the bottom line. People are starving. People don't have roofs over their head. So to pretend that they can just exclusively work for good is a nice idea, but at the end of the day, there are real challenges being faced. And so this is where we need to start shifting our mindset and saying, okay, how can we sustain ourselves financially, but also bring value, real meaningful value to our communities? And in that way, we also start thinking more long-term instead of just, okay, what's tomorrow, what's next week, and what's that? And we really start setting the foundation for Africa's development path. So I think as complex as that answer may sound, I think what I'm really trying to say is that at the macro level in Africa, we have many challenges. And as a micro individual, you can start to chip away at that challenge, but also at the same time, create financial value and sustainability for yourself. And I think that's really where you can start, is what are the challenges in your immediate community, in your immediate society? And you feel free to also refer to our WeBloom Africa website, where we have various tools for sustainable business models, how to build them, and how to really, manage this, financial sustainability and social impact. So that would be my answer on where to start.
Thanks. And actually, the end of your answer actually is a great segue into our next question, which is from Silaziwe Mafika, who's asking, how do we anticipate the impact of labor competitiveness when we can source skills from anywhere in the world? I mean, the world for a while, the world has been flat and you can access these skills. But now, as we go into this rapid virtualization, it's only going to increase and we're going to have access to many more skills. So how do we actually anticipate the impact on labor competitiveness? And Aditya, if you want to answer this one.
Sure, absolutely. So what we're seeing, here is fundamentally, the transformation of work, but not just the transformation of the workforce. What we're going to experience also is transformation of industries, right? So, the cold hard truth is that some industries are going to go extinct, right? So when you think about, when you're thinking about building new capabilities, new skill sets that are relevant, are that will be relevant in the future, right? You have to think about being world class, right? Because as the question says, and the point of the question is that competition is moving from being local, right, or being limited to a specific region to being global, right? So if you're thinking about moving into some kind of field or learning new skills, right, your objective has to be world class from day one, right? And building on Krista's point about blind spots, and Hilda's thoughts on empirically driven adoption of new, collaboration techniques. The good news is that there's still time to adjust. There's time to learn. It isn't happening across the world, across all industries at one moment, right? It's going to take a little bit of time. Exactly when, that complete total transformation would happen, I can't say, but you don't wait till that event happens, right? So we can't be emotional about the past. We have to be data driven. We have to be flexible. We have to adapt. We have to embrace change. We cannot be rigid. And what is going to likely happen, isn't going to be some sort of incremental change or some kind of, sustaining type innovation, as Clayton Christensen talks about in his books. What we are approaching here is some sort of event horizon that is going to come, right? So if you're a world leading expert in the field that is going to be extinct and irrelevant, right? That wouldn't be helpful when that change eventually comes. So I think our short answer to the question is, now's the time to be very flexible. Now is the time to prepare. And now's also the time to, realize that you would have to be competitive at a global level, right? In order for you to, to protect yourself and protect your incomes, protect your income in the world that is emerging.
No, thanks for that answer. I think that's you're spot on, and it really is about being flexible and adaptable. Just as we in tonight's show have had to be flexible and adaptable to the fact that we haven't had sound with Valter. So, we're adapting. I think we're still trying to get him back online, and I think we might have it now. So the point is, don't give up. Valter, are you there?
I hope so.
Yes.
In the physical world, we get flat tires. In the virtual world, we get crashed devices, and so I apologize to you in the audience, but I'm back. Looks like it.
No, great to have you on the show, and we are close to the end. So I just want to let's give you a bit of an introduction. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you're seeing in the future of the workforce? I mean, you're dealing with this on a daily basis.
So Mick, I think there's an important thing. I managed to pick up the audio, and perhaps one of the things we need to think about is that we are focusing a lot on the progression of the technology and how technology is going to impact jobs, and that's a valid concern. We probably have to go down a layer or two, and one is that what's impacting jobs is the negative attributes of those jobs. So for a long time, those jobs have been unsafe, they've been undignified, they've been inefficient, etc., and they've lost their competitiveness or their appeal. And those are the first jobs that are going to essentially be affected by technology. But the other way to think about this is that instead of focusing on the progression of the exponential curve, we've got to look at the time frame between the introduction of a new technology into an economy. And so maybe let me rephrase it slightly different. When a new technology is introduced into an organization or to an economy, etc., where it's got its disruptive, creates a disruptive trend, we'll see a decline in probably in jobs or wages or a stagnation of some sort. And then there's a moment that it recovers, and then we see that recovery in jobs and in wages, and then we see a growth in wages and jobs. That's been the trend over the last 100 years. Now, instead of focusing on the progression of the technology, which is where we're all fixated, we should be focusing on that gap between where we see a drop in jobs and a stagnation in wages. That was known or has been termed as the Engels pause almost 200 years ago, and we're perhaps experiencing a digital pause now at the moment, and with COVID, we're experiencing a COVID pause. So our focus should be on reducing that pause as much as possible. And there's many things we can do. Hilda spoke about empowering entrepreneurs with infrastructure around technology, etc. Or was it Krista that mentioned that? So that's one of the things we need to do. We need to get the skills right in the workforce. We've got to embrace this construct of lifelong learning, and also, something that Adao touched on is organizations are going to have choice. There's in the past we've tried to bring the expert into the organization. Oh.
We got you still. You can carry on.
The connection's dropping. No problem. So in the past, the organizations were fixated with bringing the expert into the organization. In the gig economy and an economy that's based on the ecosystem construct, the focus is going to be on bringing the expertise into the organization for that moment in time. So there's many changes. These changes are new. I suppose it creates a tremendous amount of anxiety. But if we transition through these changes in a very structured, disciplined, and coherent way, I think the outcomes are going to be positive for economies, for industries, and even for jobs in the long term. And perhaps just one last thing I want to mention, and Hilda and Adao touched on it. It's very easy to talk about the future of work and how technology is going to impact on it if you are operating in a large corporate or you're in a first world economy. if you're in a country with high levels of unemployment like we do, people that are unemployed are not worried about the workplace or the cool technology. They just want a job. And even there, and Adao will, I'm sure you will agree with me, even there, digital and exponential technologies are creating jobs that weren't available before. Adateo's business, as an example, is creating jobs for individuals that was not possible without the technology platforms that he uses. Hilda spoke about the negative bias we have towards women entrepreneurs. A lot of these technologies are enabling the sharing of infrastructure, collaborative consumption that I speak about. And the main benefactors of collaborative consumption are women and the youth. So we've got to change our lens and be less afraid about these changes that are coming at us. And instead of focusing on the threat, probably focus on the opportunities and what needs to be true for us to maximize the dividends that we can extract or create from these new technologies.
Thanks so much for that feedback, Valter. What I really love about you is that you can be trying to fix your machine, crashing on and off, and you still heard everything and really you understand this world so well. So thank you for that. We're going to go into another question from Roxy Mini, where she says, what is the future of the inexperienced workforce? Because how will we train fresh graduates remotely? And Valter, let's also just build on your answers. What must leadership do, especially when we're working remotely, in order to ensure quality and upskilling in the right way?
So there's multiple dimensions to that. So one is the individual that comes into an environment where they have to be trained up. Think of the typical apprenticeship, mechanic, plumber, carpenter, etc. With exponential technologies, those individuals could be trained up more rapidly by using AR and VR technologies. And you covered this in one of your previous shows. You don't necessarily, your ability to be trained is not limited by someone available to train you. So AR and VR can certainly, in very technical fields, and not just physical fields, but also advanced technical fields, accelerate experience and training. That's one. The other one is the platforms that it creates, linking people without the experience, but perhaps with certain skills. When I say experience, I'm talking about work experience, but with certain skills to job opportunities. And there's a South African outfit called Kuda that I've had the pleasure of meeting, which is a collection of young entrepreneurs that are creating a platform that, again, links individuals with the right expertise to organizations that are looking for those expertise. And they're able to connect individuals across a wide range of expertise, from engineers right to someone to work at an event. And that connection makes things a lot simpler. And then and I think then what's also happening is as organizations embrace these exponential technologies, they themselves have to get their workforce skilled up. So I'm seeing a lot of large corporates that are establishing these intern programs to bring fresh interns out of, with the right, obviously, exposure and background, to bring them into the organization and put them through some form of accelerated learning so that they can become fluent in these new technologies and these new ways of working, which are so critical for organizations. There is a skill shortage, and it's not just in South Africa, it's a worldwide thing. We've got to stop focusing on what the problem is and start focusing on what needs to be true to try and solve this problem. And if we change that, the dialogue, then I think the opportunities become a lot clearer, and we don't get stuck on just dialoguing about the threat.
No, I totally agree to that. Krista, do you want to add?
Yeah, I would agree with Valter, and I'll try to build off of that. I think there are platforms out there that are incredible. Here in Canada, we've been working with one called Verbella to try to bring Indigenous youth from rural and remote communities into training programs, and that's phenomenal. But I think it's also a balance of the technologies and using in person where you can in different ways. So I worked on a project a few years ago with Digital Opportunity Trust in Northern Kenya, where we looked at training trainers in communities and then enabled them to go out. And by deliberately selecting young women as the trainers and the holder of the technology and having them then transfer that knowledge, we weren't just taking on the challenge of training one individual, we were trying to upskill an individual and a community, and also looking at, are there some other systemic challenges? So kind of into Hilda's work. So I would challenge us that as we look at transferring these skills to those who are inexperienced, not just taking on the primary challenge of that one-to-one transferability, but being deliberate in how we design to say, can we use platforms that are going to increase the skill of the organization and the individuals? So using these technology platforms and thinking how they're going to work in other ways of working, as well as can we start to try to deliberately take on some of the other inherent problems that exist within our infrastructures and look at models of that knowledge transference that could take that on. So I think that's a challenge that we're up to, but it will also make a huge difference down the road if we can bring these inexperienced individuals in different ways than we have in the past. So not looking at that pure one-to-one transference.
Absolutely. Hilda, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you articulated it so perfectly, Krista. Thank you for that. And the only thing I would add is to really remind us all that, digitization and technology, they're not naturally going to balance our systems. And we are still the custodians of these technologies and of these systems. So before we can see them actually being harnessed for change, we need to be actively trying to adapt them for these marginalized communities, for people who are disproportionately excluded from those kinds of privileges. So yeah, the only thing I would say is I would really kind of implore organizations to be a bit more deliberate and actively seek those people who are looking for those opportunities. So there's really a push and pull when it comes to people trying to upskill and get new skills. Yes, it's getting more competitive, but I think organizations and industry also has clout and a part to play in balancing the playing field.
No, thank you. So talking about that clout, we've got a question from Trevor Harding where he's asking, how do big legacy complex organizations change beyond just remote working? Adao, as you were saying earlier. Let's start with Adao and then move to Valter on this question.
Sure. So when you talk about big organizations, right, you're also talking about experienced organizations, right? And I think this connects back to the previous question on, what is the fate of the inexperienced workforce? And I think this raises a fundamental question, right? Which is, what is the value of experience itself, right? How relevant is experience to new job types or to new categories and to new needs that are emerging as well, right? So I think this leads us to some other philosophical debates around our soft skills, for example, right? Are soft skills more important than hard skills, right? Is mental flexibility a much more valuable skill set than field-based experience? So I think that the focus really has to shift, from focus from legacy, from experience rather to learning. As the nature of work changes, learning models and objectives also need to change, right? We need to focus on relevant, data-driven, high-impact learning, right? And this includes large organizations, right? They need to learn, whether you're an experienced person or at a more macro level, an experienced organization, right? A lot of the experience and the assets that you've accumulated in the past might not be relevant for the future, right? So I think fundamentally the question goes back to what is the value of the assets and the experience and the legacy that you have, and how relevant is that to the future? And I think those are debates that are still ongoing, right? I'd love to hear the thoughts of the other panelists, but from what I've seen so far, experience isn't always as valuable as we might think it is.
For that, we totally echo that sentiment. It really is about constant lifelong learning. And, even if you think about what's happened to us with COVID, a lot of people that were working in careers for a very long time never thought they would have to get into this Zoom meetings or Teams meetings. Yeah. And now you've had to very quickly adapt and change. So Valter, over to you for this question.
So, building on to what Adao mentioned, I think lifelong learning is got to be a mindset. We shouldn't wait for organizations to get our learning up the curve. We should take responsibility for our own learning. This is your own career capital that you've got to take control of. And just I want to leave you with a stat that says that your knowledge is decaying at about 30% a year. So anything in your CV that's older than 3 years is probably irrelevant to help you get your next job. notwithstanding your wisdom, etc. I'm talking about those specific skills. So moving on from that point, look, so Trevor usually asks tough questions, and maybe there's a multidimensional response to that question. The first one is the organization needs to understand what its ambition is. Why is it embracing this new digital technology? Is it to generate new revenue through innovation, reduce the cost of doing business by improving productivity, changing the customer experience, etc.? Once they understand why they're doing it, they also know what kind of technologies that they're going to bring in place. And if they know which technologies they're going to bring in place, they know exactly what the current skill base in the workforce is and where they need to get the workforce to get to. Now, if you approach it from that perspective, it is a structured approach. You can transition the workforce mostly because it can be done in a very orchestrated and organized way. I think what organizations experience is that they're not necessarily progressing or transforming from a digital or innovative perspective quick enough. And then we have a situation where the business is under strain and then they make rapid moves in the workforce. And that's where you get this, again, this negative connotation that technology results in job losses. We've seen organizations that are in the heavy industry space that have successfully transitioned workforce that you'd think would never transition into a digital construct. So that's one piece of advice I'd give to business leaders. The other one is that embrace the fact that perhaps the skills that you require aren't inside your organization, and that's okay. Embrace that ecosystem thinking. Work with entrepreneurs. Work with startups. I've recently, I won't mention the name, but a South African corporate that is now using a platform to bring individuals that aren't digitally savvy onto the platform so that they can assist them in concluding the last mile delivery of their products. So what they've done is the platform has enabled individuals that are not digitally fluent in terms of they can't build their own platforms, but they know how to use these platforms. And they're now using these individuals on the platform ultimately to reduce the cost of delivering product to the in the last mile. And by doing that, they've made that service affordable and economically viable, and they've created a job for someone that's not necessarily on the upper side of the digital skills curves. So I think it's looking at the organization from the inside, making sure that you've got a plan to transition, embracing new ways of accessing those skills, the gig economy, embracing ecosystem, startups, etc., and then introducing a culture into the organization of lifelong learning. I mean, that is a critical one. The last point I'd want to mention is that you've also got to change the mindset of leadership inside organizations. You can implement all the solutions, all the technology, all the platforms, all the frameworks in the world. But if you don't have a leadership mindset that is open and curious around the new ways in which we need to engage, then these things don't work. So we've got to address leadership mindsets, and we've got to address organizational cultures to facilitate this change as well.
No, thanks so much for that. So we have actually we've run a bit over, but we're going to end with one last question to get an answer from each of you. It comes from Poleng Lopondo, who's asking, how does one prepare for the future of work now? So let's close off with just each of you giving just some advice on how does one prepare for the future of work now. And we can start with Krista.
Boy, I'm going to build off of Walter's last statement. I think a big way to prepare is to be curious. Maintaining that curiosity is going to be key to keeping the mindset and the perspective and the resilience to be able to adjust through these challenges. Because I unfortunately don't think this is the last major transformation that we're going to see, but if we maintain that curiosity, I think we'll be successful.
No, thanks. It's curiosity and resilience, and we were resilient, and we made sure that we got Valter's camera and sound working. And Valter, thank you for being resilient. Hilda, over to you.
ending with a really, really tough question, because I guess this is what we're individually and personally also navigating, right? How do we kind of approach the future now with so much uncertainty? But I think what I would say is the big strategy for myself, for the entrepreneurs that I work with on the ground, is you need to be ready to adapt, because like we've seen this year, you can plan, but there are just some things that you cannot foresee. I think be as informed and educated as you can in terms of trends and what's working in your market, in your field, etc. But also have that kind of room for adaptation. That means that if the storm comes, you don't just kind of leave and pack up shop, but you are able to pivot and really take that challenge in your stride. So yeah, I would really say try as much as you can to be informed, investigate the situation thoroughly, and try as much as possible to be adaptable and flexible.
Thanks so much. Next time, thanks for your knowledge and for the positive impact you're all making in the world. We are really grateful and appreciate being able to share this time with you guys. Don't go anywhere. Our giveaways are up next. Now it's time to give away our grand prize for season 1, Share the Tech Love, which is our way of giving back. We've given away some amazing prizes, from books, from some of our guest speakers, as well as 3D printers, robots, and a virtual reality experience. Each week, all the registered guests have gone into random draws, and we've had lucky winners win various prizes. Tonight, we're going to be giving away our main prize from Maharishi Institute, which is a 5-year business degree from someone from an underprivileged background, nominated by our random winner. So the person who wins tonight actually gets to positively impact someone else's life by giving them a world-class education from Maharishi Institute. And a huge thank you to Maharishi and Teddy Blatcher for donating this prize for the culmination of season 1. So now we're going to draw our winner. Tamsin, can you please spin the randomizer? And our winner of the prize is Barry Kagan. Congratulations to Barry Kagan. We will be in contact with you and we will announce who you have chosen for this bursary in season 2. So thanks so much to all of you for joining us tonight. There were so many nuggets of wisdom shared, and I really hope you took away some key insights on what the workforce of the future could be like, so that you can prepare and thrive in it. This is the finale for season 1. We'll be coming back to your screens in 2 weeks, or a couple of weeks, with our revamped season 2 of Exponential Africa Live. Take a look at this teaser video to see some of the topics we'll be discussing over the next 2 months. We're going to be looking at the cyber security state, where cybersecurity is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, to demystifying AI, to talking about space baby and how we will live off planet, to many other topics, from parenting lifelong learners and how do we create these successful people. So you can go to the website to start registering for season 2, get informed about all the updates, and stand a chance to win in the Share the Tech Love giveaways. You can join any of our social media pages, as well as like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please help educate students from Maharishi Institute by donating. All you have to do is scan the QR code on the screen, and the proceeds go to buying data and devices for students learning remotely. This is your last chance to make a positive difference for Maharishi. Please donate anything you can. Well done to Barry Kagan for winning the chance to nominate somebody else for this business degree. It's been extremely important for humanity to stay connected and positive about the future, because positive ideas and actions can change the world. And we have the power to overcome these challenges through collaboration. It's been a pleasure hosting you. That's all for us from season 1. I'm Mick Mann. Let's future-proof Africa together. Hope you had a good time, and stay safe and keep smiling. Over to you, Tony Mgoma, the winner of Talent Search 2018. It's always been a dream of Tony's to share happiness and magic through her music. And Tony is fast becoming a rising star. Check out for her. Tony, over to you.
If the stars would fall down from the sky, my heart would still be satisfied. 'Cause it's your love that lights me up. The angel sent you from above. I will never get enough. If heaven would take me up, I'd go there with you. I'd spend it with you. You take me higher, like I've never been before. I've been waiting on the dance floor for you to stand next to me. You take me higher. Now I'm coming back for more. With a nighttime to explore, dancing till eternity. If the stars will fall down from the sky, my heart will still be satisfied. 'Cause it's your love that lights me up. The angel sent you from above. I will never get enough. If heaven would take me up, I'd go there with you. I'd spend it with you. You take me higher, like I've never been before. I'm waiting on the dance floor for you to stand next to me. You take me higher. Now I'm coming back for more. With a nighttime to explore, dancing till eternity. Eternity. Yeah. Eternity. Eternity.